reconnect to the place you live, connect with others that share stories, and together we are the history of a just future. But we can only be a collective of a just future if we understand our roots and where we came from, and particularly if we have the privilege to understand our roots and where we came from.
It's important to remember our stories. Cuentos, dichos, mitos, the songs, the dances, the ceremonies. Always remember. That's our healing, is remembering. And we need to remember collectively.
We're here to talk about microaggressions, certainly a term that is becoming much more popularized. We've seen is defined as brief, common, verbal, behavioral, environmental indignities. So whether it's intentional or unintentional, certainly, right, we want to be mindful that these are things that can communicate hostile, derogatory, negative slights, right, that can impact marginalized communities. And humility is really this commitment to a learning and a critical self-reflection, right? So how do we really kind of work to shift the power imbalances and the client dynamics, thinking about institutional accountability, mutual respect, and partnerships that are built on trust? That's really what our kind of this work is about, certainly.
I hope to be a person that causes some great change or makes you think a little bit more about how you interact with what we call this thing of privilege and oppression. So some ways to engage: ask yourself the following questions and then answer that question. How can we work to make sure that we are understanding and undermining the system of oppression and privilege that hurts all of us? What are we doing? How are we mindful of our privileges daily? This is a safe space. We want to ensure everyone's opinions are heard and that we are engaging with one another. Most of us were raised in a homophobic society that is to include or culture LGBTQ plus folks, right? Where we experience and have seen and have grown up with stereotypes generation after generation after generation. So how are we challenging ourselves to break away from those stereotypes, particularly if we're not proximate or we don't think that we're proximate to LGBTQ plus communities, or learning about the culture, understanding that the LGBT plus community has its own verbiage and culture. So how are you looking at those intersections? What verbiage are you using? And how are you celebrating your communities? How do you show up in your communities?
Intersectionality is about being able to recognize the power systems at play when we talk about problems, access, or marginalized communities. Kimberly Crenshaw is also part of the group that coined critical race theory, which, just as a primer, never existed in any public school system. So now let's briefly talk about what happens when I feel challenged. Remain open. These may be topics that are uncomfortable, that you have no familiarity, but just be willing to listen. Research and learn. You will never know all there is on none of these subjects. Commit to learning and adding depth to your knowledge.
Let's get back together and have those conversations, right? Just so that we can keep this, and then have these conversations with our friends, our families, and our other community members, so that we can start spreading this word of like, we want some change and we need to do it, and it starts with us.